Hi everyone, Bree from MassivelyOP.com here, and today I'm going to talk to you about, drumroll please, Star Wars Galaxies, specifically Star Wars Galaxies Legends, which is the NGE-based rogue server slash emulator that I've personally been playing on for about 6 years now to cope with the loss of the original MMO, the very best MMO that's ever been made in my opinion. Okay, so Legends itself has been around for about 8 years now. It is celebrating an anniversary as I am filming this, in fact, and it's had its ups and downs in development. Last year was a bit of a quiet year, but in the last couple of years before that, we got the planet of Bespin and Cloud City itself from Empire Strikes Back. Then we got non-instanced apartments here in Cloud City. You're actually looking at mine right now, and I'm going to tour it for you later. That's sort of the point here. And then we got an insanely cool farm and ranching system. They even brought back Smuggler's Spice. It has been a wild couple of years. And now, here at the very top of 2024, the volunteer player dev team has just added a bunch of new stuff for the player city system, and it's gotten me hyped for the game all over again, hence this video. Now, player cities have been in the game since the first year of SOE's original run. I remember quite clearly because I helped found one myself for my guild, and over the years I lived in more. I was even a mayor in two of them. And it's one of those systems that's amazing for sandbox MMOs because it drives cooperation and conflict and allows players to make their mark on the game. It's everything you're looking for in a virtual world as a player and also as a dev who's trying to bake layers of stickiness into an MMORPG. However, player cities also come with some hefty problems. They're open world, so they're limited by definition. There's only so much land in the game, which means not everyone who wants a city can have one. And that leads to infighting, griefing, hostile takeovers. I'm not even making that up. It can be very messy. On Legends specifically, while the devs have boosted the cost of running cities, both in terms of how much they cost in like credits and whatnot, and also how many citizens are required to maintain it, in my opinion, the costs are still way too low, which basically means that a relatively small number of people in groups dominate the core Tier 4 and Tier 5 cities. Those are the ones with the most desirable amenities like shuttle ports. I saw a guild the other day in Discord advertising that it owned, wait for it, 5 cities across the game, which is absolutely stupid. No guild should be allowed to control that much of a game this small. And this is one of the reasons, one of multiple reasons, that I have stayed out of player cities altogether since I set up shop on Dantooine in Legends itself. There are other reasons, like I wanted to be able to control my own buildings and factories, I wanted to be able to control my storyteller deco, that sort of thing, and I just wanted to keep everything like close together because I am lazy and I don't want to run around. But mostly, I just want to avoid drama. But those complaints set to the side, I was still thrilled to see that the player devs and Legends were adding to the existing player city system with more stuff that people have been asking for since literally the days SOE was in charge. These devs have now completely revamped the way the politician subclass works, like it actually works now instead of just being a thing you get for free. They added more perks, they added more specialization to the cities themselves, so there's more than just the same couple standard things. And they added tons of new structures. There's buildings, arches, walls, bridges, and roads. Everybody really wanted roads, so now the mayor's toolkit is just that much bigger. I do have a couple quibbles with it. Honestly, it kind of annoys me that some of these objects aren't accessible in the existing storyteller system because I use that all the time and it still really only has a few items in my opinion. It needs a lot more than that. And I think it annoys me in general anytime the developers end up working on a small system that really only impacts a couple of people. I realize lots of people live in player cities, but like the people who get to actually play with most of this stuff, it's one mayor per city, and it's just not a lot of people, and that just annoys me. I don't know. It's like guild systems, I guess, in a lot of games. I say this even as a guild leader. For the most part, adding to guild systems is like giving candy to guild leaders and not to everybody else, and I don't like it. But like I said, these are really minor quibbles with these systems, and I'm pretty much willing to ignore all of it because of what I learned when I logged in to get screenshots of the new stuff on patch day itself. Someone in the Star Wars Galaxies Legends Discord mentioned that some of the new objects, the walls and some of the arches, worked inside of buildings like regular furniture deco. And my brain exploded with excitement because housing fans are always looking for objects, especially flat objects. The bigger, the better, so that you can use them to basically tweak the architecture of existing buildings on the inside. I personally have a deep hatred for most of the interior housing textures of the game. Sorry, no offense to the people who did them, but they were made 20 years ago in most cases, and they're bad. They're blurry and stretched, and they're not cool looking. I don't really like them. So I nearly always cover them up with something. I've come up with all kinds of tricks, including literally modding the textures of the game myself, knowing no one else will get to see them. It will just be me who gets to see them, but it's worth it because then my eyes aren't bleeding. So when I heard that we were getting walls, big walls, not just the little Bespin walls, but really big things that might actually just completely change the look of the interior of a building. I was like, I need that. So I logged in my architect, I started playing around, and you know what? They were right. Not everything. There's a lot of stuff I really wish had been made furniture and not just exterior deco, but there's several pieces that do work inside, and they're good pieces. And I knew I needed to build something, but I didn't want to dismantle the buildings that I already had. Yes, I have a lot of buildings. You are not allowed to judge me. You can judge my factories, but not my buildings. So I was trying to figure out what to do with this information other than just write an article. Now, I do have to admit here that I haven't been playing Legends obsessively the last year or so, not as much as I was the couple of years before that when I was just absolutely hooked. I was logging in to check every few weeks, but I was feeling really burned out in the game. If you listen to me on the MOP podcast, you've probably heard me mention this a couple of times. And, it was kind of a revelation for me. It was a big change for me because this was my game, this was my home. And there were lots of reasons for it, honestly, none of which really reflect directly that much on the game itself. Some of it's just me. I've been playing other MMOs. I play City of Heroes and Lord of the Rings Online, Guild Wars 2, Project Gorgon. And the truth is, I've been playing Star Wars for so long, and specifically crafting in Star Wars for such a long time. And I had a chef from almost from launch. So that's how long I've been doing, like, not just the game, but like this specific thing in the game for like 20 years. It's a long time, and there hasn't been a whole lot added to the crafting professions that I do. Honestly, there just hasn't. And the economy hasn't been super healthy. I've talked about this in the podcast too. Stagflation has definitely been a problem for a few years. And just over the last year, I could see it getting worse and worse and worse, even with consumables, which is where a lot of my stuff goes. A lot of my crafting is aimed anyway. I have like enough resources that I never have to harvest anything again if I don't really want to, which it's like not much incentive. There's a low motivation there. And some of the new stuff they've added that I thought I was going to be enthralled with, like the farming system, I think it's absolutely amazing. I even like pushed to give it an award. We gave it an award when it came out on the site, but the way it's set up, it does not work with my messy life whatsoever. It's very unforgiving if you can't log in to fiddle with the planting minigame for an hour every day for several weeks, because your plants are going to die if you don't do this. There's no way to pause it. That just didn't work for me. But I'd say the thing that probably tipped me over actually was one of those little dominoes that sets off an avalanche, that kind of thing. It was, believe it or not, the Droid inventory change, which I think they put in last year or the year before. I can't remember which year it was, but it's been driving me crazy ever since. This is very granular here, but I want to explain it because it directly pertains to like the point of why I'm doing this whole video and why I think Star Wars has hooked me again. I swear I will get to this eventually. Let me give you some backstory. The devs were apparently trying to fix a space exploit where people were using their droid storage to help them AFK farm for days up in space without ever having to land and come back and interact with the rest of the game. So, at least if I understand it correctly, I don't really do space anymore. I haven't really done it much since live. Anyway, the devs tweaked the droid so that you can only open the storage, so you can open the storage of only one droid at a time. I'm saying that right. Even in ground content, it wasn't just a fix in space. I don't know if they meant to or it was an accident or what, but they also fixed it in ground content. Now, this is not a change that the vast majority of people would even notice at all, let alone object to. I am well aware of this. And in fact, even for 4 of my characters, meh, it is a minor nuisance. However, for my droid engineer herself, it basically destroyed all of my craft, all of my desire to craft, all of my my crafting process the way I had it set up. Unlike camps and food and armor, that's the main stuff I craft. Unlike those things, droids were something I handcrafted rather than made in factories. And the way I did it was I stored all my components in my 20 or so droids. I would open all of them up at once. I would be buried under my windows. I think I even put a picture on Twitter of that once at one point just to show how ridiculous it was. But that's fine because it made it really easy to craft a whole bunch of droids without needing to open a million storages over and over. And I had them with me all the time, so I could do this in any of my houses. I didn't have to just be in one spot where my actual resources were because they came with me. That all means that the change made my whole crafting playstyle basically impossible overnight. Absolutely crushed it. And I was so annoyed by it. I even messaged the devs like, "Sup, can you guys fix this? Because this sucks." And they were like, "Oh man, sorry, we'll look into it." I am guessing I am the only person in the world who even noticed this because let's just say they have not changed it, however long it's been, a year or two, whatever. So it's still busted for ground players. And I knew that the only way that I was ever going to be able to replicate the style of crafting I had was to get another house, set up all the storage, make it purpose built for crafting droids. And I was so annoyed by the whole thing. I was just not in the mood for it. I didn't feel like doing that. I already had a bunch of houses. I didn't want another one. I didn't want to decorate one. I was grumpy. And I was like, screw it, I'm done. I'm with droids, I mean. Like I just decided that I didn't want to make that anymore. I didn't have a reason to handcraft them. The game was going out of its way to make it really difficult for me to handcraft them. It was one of those like cascading things, right? So I stopped making them, I stopped stocking them, I stopped updating them when I ran out of my vendors, and then that just meant that I stopped needing to sink as much time into the game, right? I only needed to log in to do, factories for my other crafters. And that slowly became, well, I guess I don't need to log in very much at all. I'll play something else. And then in retrospect, that just kind of reduced my whole interest in my factory crafters too. That was the domino. That's a fascinating little tidbit. I think it's fascinating anyway, because sometimes it doesn't take like a major, gigantic nerf of your favorite class. Sometimes it's these tiny little patch changes that you think are meant for the best of intentions, with the best of intentions to fix some exploit someplace, in a completely different corner of the game, but it just has one of those ripple effects that just destroys the rest. It just destroys the whole reason you were playing in the first place. So that's basically what happened. I just wasn't playing very much. I was just occasionally logging in and stocking my factory related vendors, and my heart wasn't in it anymore. I was just playing other stuff. So when this patch came up, I was like, ooh, because new shiny, right? And I thought, well, I'll just log in, I'll take pictures for our article, and I'll probably just wander back away. And that's okay, because, MMOs need to not be, permanent homes. They need to be places you come back to. That's fine. But instead, what actually ended up happening was that once I realized, ooh, this is a thing I can actually do, right? It's not just for people who own a city right now. This is something I can mess with, and I happen to have an architect. So I was messing around with my architect. I was feeling the urge to build something with the stuff she was able to make that I knew I could put down in a house, and I just couldn't decide what to do. So to get some inspiration, I decided I'd tour some cities. I'm taking pictures the whole while, tour a bunch of player cities that already exist. That first week or so that the mayors had these new tools, and I was going to see how they were using the pieces. I would do all that, just have a see, look around and see what they were actually doing with this stuff. And then what I thought was, while I was doing that, I would also check up on travel hubs. I have talked about travel hubs a ton on the podcast. I'm obsessed with this. They're basically like rune libraries. Lots of games have them. City of Heroes, I've been obsessed with it in there too. Ultima Online was the first place I ever saw rune libraries. Travel hubs, transit hubs, port stations, you can call them whatever you want. They're basically any kind of building that players build that has a way for other players to come in and like teleport to other places using that base as a hub, as a teleporting station. And in Star Wars, player run buildings use AT-AT heads. I know this makes no sense. Like AT-AT, AT-ATs, right? The big, you know what I'm talking about. I don't know why the AT-AT heads in the game do this, but they do. So for whatever reason, you can use these AT-AT heads and program two locations in them, and then anybody who clicks on the AT-AT head can teleport to either one of these locations. This is all very silly, but over time, over the last couple of years, really, people who have amassed great, piles of wealth have spent it on AT-AT heads, and some of the really cool, like rune libraries, transit hubs in the game now have like 50 or 100 of these freaking heads, and you have to come up with really clever and creative ways to actually arrange them so they aren't ridiculous. And people can come to your base and they'll mark your base. They'll like save it as their main hub, right? And then they come to you and then check it. It's really cool. I love it. I love it because it's a way that players can give back to the game and actually insert, a public utility for everybody else. I think that's really awesome. And It's a reason to go to certain towns. It's a reason to go to people's buildings other than vendors. So anyway, what I thought I would do is I would go through my list of all of these hubs that I've already been collecting for years, and I would just go check on them because every once in a while somebody quits the game or moves or they have a, crisis with their current city, so they pick their whole hub up and they take it to another town. It happens all the time. Every time I wander back, at least one of my hubs is dead. So I thought I would walk around, I'd port around, see what was out there, see who was still functioning. So as I'm going through these hubs, I realized I had one in Cloud City, and I was like, I don't remember there ever being one in Cloud City, let alone actually marking the waypoint for myself, but here it is. Like I must have done it, right? And the weird thing is like I barely think of Bespin in Cloud City and the apartment system there at all. Like I don't have a whole lot of reason to go personally. I don't really play my combat character there. I don't really play my entertainer there. And I only occasionally bring like one of my crafters there to do a very specific crafting quest. It's really a grind. It's the crafter grind. It's not even a quest. It's just the same grind over and over again to get certain amount of tokens, whatever, they're not tokens, it's like Tibana gas, whatever the gas is, I forget. And you basically exchange that for the two recipes that I make over and over again that for some reason have been turned into consumables here, and that's the cheesecake, strawberry cheesecake, and the reverse engineering shirt recipes that my chef, my domestics trader, uses all the time. So that's like the only reason I come to Bespin. I don't really have a reason to sightsee here. So I had sort of forgotten about it, sort of not really thinking all that much about it at all. And I was like, all right, I'll go and I'll look. And I wander into this hub. Not only is it still there, but it's open to the public still. There's like, I don't know, 50, 60 added heads in there. So more than 100 waypoints. No other furniture except for like a couple of chairs, right? You can see it. I'm showing it to you right now. And I was kind of blown away. Like I went through to the apartment and I saw the view of this apartment and I was like, "Damn, I need one of these. Why don't I have one of these? What was I thinking? I have no idea, but I need one." Okay, so I need to tell you some things about these apartments that will explain why I didn't have one, why a lot of people never bought one, and why the apartments still aren't full even to this day. First, they are not cheap. They are kind of expensive. They are 25 million credits for a license upfront, which is like transferable between, different apartments. So you only pay that fee once as long as you reclaim it properly. This is not a tremendous amount of money for me. I have a lot of money and way more worth in resources and stuff, but a newer player to the game or even a casual player to the game is not going to just have that lying around to blow on a house. No other house in the game costs that, right? That's kind of nuts. You can also have only one per account, as far as I can tell. I don't know of a way to get another token for them, so you only get one. You pay a couple million more in just in rent fees, which is kind of a lot. Again, there aren't any houses in the game that I know of that cost that much in upkeep fees. And the most annoying part is that you can't just dump in a ton of money like you can with a regular house and not ever worry about it again. Stop thinking about it. You actually can't pay more than 90 days ahead, which means you have to keep logging in and you have to log into that character and that house and go to that house and pay for that house. So you can't just, stick it on an alt and never worry about it again. You really do have to pay upkeep, and it doesn't pull from your bank like regular houses do. So if you do forget about it, and your 90 days and 97 days, I guess it really is, are go past and you don't pay it up, you lose the apartment. Now, it's like the other houses in the game where it packs up for you, right? So you could technically get it back. But like that's kind of annoying. It's like a minor pain in the butt to maintain and actually hold on to one of these apartments. So I can understand why a lot of people just don't bother. It's just easier to go with another house. I'll say they're also a little bit of a pain in the butt to access, especially at launch because they didn't at launch. Sorry, at the launch of the apartment specifically, I don't think they had all of the teleport pads at every place yet. I think they added a lot of those later. I think those help a lot, but you still have to bind your ITV to one of those, and then you still have to run all the way outside, inside, up the elevator, and then click on the thing to actually it's kind of a nuisance. Like I can understand why people are like, forget about it, I don't want to do that. Or worse, I don't want my alts to have to do that. Or even worse, I don't want my customers to have to do that, so I can't put vendors there. You know, it's a trade-off, I fully admit. There are some ITVs, like I said, that will make this it's instant transport vehicles, I think is what that stands for. There's a couple of different ones floating around. You can usually buy them on the buy them on people's vendors, somewhere between like 5 and 20 mil. It really just depends on which one you're looking for. Most people will get like the snow speeder because you can pre-program it for 2, and that's actually pretty nice. But the really useful one for apartments is called the Solar Sailor, because that one will drop you right at your apartment door. Of course, that only works for the character who owns it. Your alts will still have to go the long way. Either way, it's just kind of a minor nuisance when the other houses in the game don't require that, when you can easily just mark yourself right at your door with your ITV and not have to worry about running. And personally, that's like a big drawback for me. Like I'm very lazy. I really do not want to deal with elevators and with running. And every time I come out the damn elevator, I always turn the wrong way. I never turn east. I don't know what my problem is. So this is like a big deal. I can understand why people were like, nah, too expensive, too much hassle, even with the ITVs and the landing pads and all the other post-launch perks. Of course, there are some pretty major upsides to counterbalance all the downsides too. And I think the big one for me is that these apartments are not instanced. I mean that quite literally. They are open world housing, just like all the other housing in the game. You are not just going into a time portal and coming out and everybody's got the same apartment. There are 3 different styles of apartments. That's not what I mean. So you can pick whichever one floats your boat. But each one is the only one exactly like it in the entire Bespin area. So what I mean by that is there are like 16 or so buildings. I don't know how many. Um, and so they're all different. You pick your building, then you pick your floor, and then you pick which direction your window faces, basically. And there's only one that has all of those things, right? So you are the only apartment in the entire game that has exactly that same view at that exact height, right? Because these are all non-instanced. I really love this. I'm obsessed with this. So like I live in merchant quarters right across from the Crafting Guild Hall. I live on the 14th floor on the eastern side. So merchant quarters 14E. Nobody else has that apartment. I'm the only one. In fact, it's such a great view. That's why I picked it. It's actually like exactly one apartment down from that epic ITV, the Adet Head apartment that I was showing, because that was the view that I actually fell in love with. And so I just got the apartment right below it. Not only can I access the ITVs really easily if I wanted to, but also I have almost that identical view. It's just one apartment lower. It's absolutely gorgeous. I get all of the buildings and I get all of the sky and I get to see down onto the ground. And that's like the second upside here, is that because the apartments are not instanced, that means the world that you're looking at is also not instanced. That's actually Cloud City. That's actually where people are driving around on their speeders and people are running into the crafting hall. So you're watching the actual game world play out below you. So for me, I basically weighed all of the caveats along with all of those pluses, and I just decided I'd go for it. What's 25 million at this point? The game is 8 years old. Live a little, right? And I knew that I personally needed a hook to get back into the game, and it's very often housing related for me because I get really obsessed about making the perfect house. And suddenly I had both. Like I had a house and a hook, and this was an easy thing, and maybe I could help myself get back into the game and actually fall in love again. So I toured like all the apartment buildings. I spent like a couple of days like just literally going into every building, checking them out. I was kind of disappointed actually. This is a good place to say this because you can click at one point. I'll show you this in the footage, but you can click on or on the apartment, like there's like a listing before you actually go up the elevator, and you can see all of the occupied, like every single apartment, which ones are occupied, whatever goofy thing that the owner actually named it. Some of them are for sale by players, and some of them you can just use your token on. And there's a bunch that are reserved also. I've seen a lot of grumbling in Discord about the reserved ones, gonna be honest. My understanding is that the devs like randomly reserved a whole bunch of them, and then they like shift what's reserved every once in a while based on what isn't taken, just to keep some available for the future for future players. I guess they didn't want like veterans to come in and like grab everything and make it impossible for anybody else to have it apart. They didn't want Final Fantasy 14. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. They were trying to avoid that. The problem is that we're not even remotely close to full occupancy on these apartments. Like that maybe there's was a Prime Tower, I think, looked like it was maybe 75% full, and like most of them are more like the one I'm in, Merchant Quarters, where they've got maybe 10% full, maybe. I actually visited some that didn't have like more than one or two. I'm like you basically have the entire apartment complex to yourself. If you really wanted that, you could have it. So again, I know apartments didn't take off the way they should have, or we would be like butting up against those reserves. That disappoints me a little bit because I think these are actually really cool, and I hope that the devs are taking that to heart because it's not that they're not cool, it's that they're just hard to access. And if we could all get one of those ITVs, right, that boosted everybody's characters straight to the doors, and so we didn't have to go through that fuss, maybe they'd be more popular. And I think the pricing structure and the fact that you can only have one per character or one per account. There's just a bunch of all those caveats I mentioned basically, I think are just stacking up to make people just not care. The other thing is they just spent a whole lot of time buffing the player cities and giving people even less incentive to live in Bespin apartments because people who live there are spending a ton of money and getting absolutely none of the benefits that they would be getting in a player city. And I don't just mean social, I mean the literal the the specialization upgrades. So you can get all kinds of stuff like faster experience and better harvesting and better crafting, all the works. So you're giving up all of those things to live in Bespin. They're going to have to figure out something to encourage people to actually take those apartments. I don't know what it's going to be, but they've got to do something. It's such a shame to let a system like this just kind of go underutilized. Anyhow, like I said, once I toured all those buildings, I ended up picking literally the apartment below the very first one that I fell in love with anyway. So I could have saved myself a bunch of time and just grabbed that one. So I love it. Honestly, I love that spot. And after I bought it, I figured out, I'll show you this at the very end of the video, that my apartment has the best view of the administrator's tower, Lando's tower, and that means that occasionally I can stand at my window and I can literally see the Millennium Falcon landing on Lando's little platform way up in the sky. When I realized this, I literally lost it. I thought that was so cool. I knew that was there because I saw it in when I was doing the testing out their beta way forever ago, back in before the apartments even came out. But I was just kind of floored to find out that the apartment that I randomly bought, like I bought because it was pretty, not because of this, actually had that A plus. So, as I've been talking here, I'm showing footage of my travels throughout some of the apartments in Cloud City, and if I'm honest, I don't really like them. Like, I like the views and I like the idea of apartments. I don't super love the style of Cloud City. Like, it's not that great. It's like shiny white plastic to me. It's either shiny white plastic or it's that dingy metal grating look, and I cannot stomach either one of those to live in for a long period of time. They absolutely captured the movies, don't get me wrong, but I'm talking about buying a house here, buying an apartment. I want to live in this place. I knew that was not going to be it for me. And that's where these two stories converge because I was like, well, I'll just use all the new cool Tatooine walls and arches that they just added with the new player city system. So that's what I have done. I took walls, pillars, arches. I used the traditional Jabba's Palace style. It's my favorite style in the whole game. And and I've added a bunch of new pieces that they added around Christmas time. I'll show you these when I get to the apartment itself. Back in early December, the Legends team added a custom-built Wookiee treehouse as a player house. It's kind of ridiculous. It's like the tallest thing in the freaking game. Honestly, I'm really tired of seeing them everywhere, and I really wish they had been a lot more rare and limited because they're kind of ridiculous. But they are really pretty. They are really cool. I understand why people love them. But for me, the most important thing wasn't the house. It was the fact that The addition of the house came with multiple wood, arch, and wall panels that can be crafted by structures traders, and I had never gotten to play with them before. I knew that the treehouse was coming. I got to break the news. They gave it to me as an exclusive, but I didn't know about the other pieces because I hadn't actually been playing over Christmas. I wasn't paying that much attention. So when I found that out, I was like, gotta have them. The wooden walls make not just good walls, but beautiful floors. I had to have them. I knew that was going to be my jam. So as you're going to see here in just a second, I had a couple of goals for this apartment. I didn't just, buy it with no plan. I actually had a couple of like specific guidelines in mind for myself. First, I wanted to cover every single freaking wall and floor so I didn't see any white plastic. I didn't want it to actually look like Cloud City at all, except the view through the windows, because that was like sort of the point. Two, I wanted to actually build an apartment that actually had apartment features. I'd never do things like this. I never build a house with a bed. I don't think I've done that since live, and I was building barracks, and that doesn't count. So I wanted to just make it look like a posh apartment somehow, as well as have some, other more utilitarian purposes. Three, I wanted to put a special emphasis on the ceilings. The ceilings in these apartments are really tall, and I really wanted to play around with them. A lot of the buildings, especially the older buildings in the game, have really low ceilings, so you can't really do that. And I wanted to try that here. Four, I knew I was going to have to divide up the room because it's huge. I mean, like really absurdly large. And honestly, I don't like big buildings, big structures, big rooms. I like small rooms. So I knew I was going to have to figure out a way to cut it up in a bunch of different pieces without actually like blocking off too much of the windows and like making the rooms in the back, windowless huts. I didn't want them to be like feel like closets back there. I wanted everything to have a view of some sort. That's again the whole point of having an apartment like this. Five, I needed to figure out a way to make traveling to and from this apartment less of a pain in the butt because otherwise I wasn't going to use it. I knew I would just be wasting money if I couldn't actually get to it and get away from it quickly. And the last thing, six, I needed to give my poor old droid engineer a new crafting area. She needed all kinds of storage for her droid components and a pretty place to hang out so that I could focus on her and try to get back into droid engineering again and rekindle my love for that part of the crafting game. And so now we are at my apartment, and I have done all six of those things, I like to think anyway, and you'll see that as I'm going through each room. I set up a main sitting area, there's a formal area and an informal area to try to showcase the big window in the middle, of course, because that's sort of the centerpiece of the entire room. Now, I did use lots of arches over the windows. I kind of broke that rule a little bit, but I don't think I've blocked enough of the view to actually hurt, and I think it actually enhances it. It frames it a little bit better so it doesn't just look like blank plate glass, which kind of drives me crazy. And I also use those same arches to divide the room into five smaller rooms, right? But since it's all arches and not solid walls, it still lets the light through, and everywhere you stand, almost everywhere you stand in the entire room, the entire apartment, you can still see, some orange and pink sky out there. And since I was using a lot of the light sandstone Tatooine stuff, like up on the walls and ceilings and whatnot, I used the darker pieces, the wood look stuff on the floors for balance, basically. And some of them are my old tricks. Like one of them is Mustafarian tables. People have been doing that since live. I had buildings on live that use that. I think that's a classic way of fixing some of the ugly floors in the game. But also those new the Kashyyykian treehouse wood panels. I'll show those as I go through. It's actually a really quite a nice texture. I wish it didn't. There's like it doesn't tile very well on the vertical end, so there's like a black line. But you know what? I'm willing to put up with that because it's still really nice. It's still one of the better textures in the game. Um, and yeah, in the middle room here up on the ceiling, I try to work on the ceilings. So here I've got that cool piece from the end of A New Hope. I forget what they call it here, the Avatar or something. I'm not sure what it's called here, but it's like that big circular battle screen that Leia and 3PO and General Dodonna are looking around. It's that. So I flipped it upside down, put it up on the ceiling, and now it's a cool ceiling feature. One thing I want to note here, this is totally, if you're playing around with these pieces, I wanted to tell you this because you might not notice it right away. But the Tatooine pillars from the new system, they pivot around one of their edges rather than the center. And if you know anything about decorating Star Wars, that means that if you have one in just the right position, if you fix the yaw at just the right angle, you can slide it out to cover the light colored Bespin metal areas around these giant windows and completely make the whole thing look like Tatooine or whatever it is you're doing. Sometimes you can't push it out there until you actually rotate it a couple times and then it'll go out there on its own. Just a nice little trick. It doesn't work in all four yaw orientations, Joe, though just that one, so you'll have to flip it around a little bit. Okay, so we're going over to the southeast room now, and that is where I built the bedroom I promised. Again, it's not something I usually do. I don't really like the beds in the game, except the Jabba bed, which actually isn't in the game because the devs still haven't added it, even though we're 8 years in. I even owned one on live. I think they came from the trading card game, actually. And yeah, I saw someone in Discord complaining about this like specific problem a while back. They were saying that the devs were gating all of the old deco and like saving it for events or like future patches or something. And at the time I was like, "Oh, that's just come on, guys. That's exaggerating." But you know what? Now I'm starting to be like, "Yeah, we're getting old here. It's been 8 years. Let's just give us the stuff before we're too old to enjoy it, please." But in the meantime, I tried to build my own. I tried to make it look like, the same scale as the rest of the space. And I used those gorgeous new treehouse arches. There's several of those. I used a lot of those actually. None of my other houses really have them, so I really enjoyed getting to play with those. And I used the new treehouse beams to try to cover up the cool Tatooine arches, which I love, the ones with the grates at the top. I was just trying to give them the extra window pane look that otherwise it doesn't look, it's just they look like big blank windows. Actually, they look like nothing. They don't even look like windows. They're just like blank. And that kind of creeps me out a little bit, like I'm about to fall out. You can't fall out, in case you're wondering, but it gives you that kind of impression. Also, I wanted to point out that up on the ceiling in this area, I used the red Jabba the Hutt rugs from the storyteller system. I think that's where this come from. But I used the same Tatooine pillars to divide them into blocks, basically to hide all the seams. I actually borrowed that idea from, gosh, I've long since forgotten. There was a Naboo house with lots of really great deco. And they had kind of done that, but they had used different pieces to actually divide it up. But I really liked how it looked. So I thought I would kind of try that. And I actually really liked it really here. I thought it looked really good in a space this big. That other house was using it in a much smaller space and it was cute. But I actually kind of like this better. And I have to also say here, I hate the color red. Like, I do not decorate with the color red except for like teeny tiny little pops of color on occasion. So this room, like, I was like way out of character for me. I was really stepping outside my comfort zone to make this room, and I actually kind of like it. Yeah, also having a room with no purpose at all. There isn't even a chair in this room is also super out of character for me. I almost always put at least a chair so that if my character's in there, I can plant their butt and, I don't know, look or something, look at the room and have a place to not be bobbling around, but not here. So now if we scoot down to the southwest room here, you can see I used even more treehouse arches, plus the really cool, like extra large Tatooine arches, all stacked up next to each other to form what is basically a curved ceiling. This was something I discovered on accident. I'm sure lots of people will be doing this. I'm not the only one who will have discovered this for sure, but I accidentally put a couple next to each other, and I realized that if I did it on purpose, I could make a complete ceiling that actually looked like one coherent piece. I liked how this looked so much. I actually stole it again and put it in my farm when I redid it. But I'll show you guys later that at the end of the video. I'll give you a peek into that too. So this room is basically my teleport room. I knew I needed a way to get out of this place without having to go back out to the freaking elevator, go all the way down, go all the way to the... That was not happening. So I knew I was going to need at least a couple of everyone's favorite AT-AT heads in this room so that my characters could escape quickly. And the spots I picked specifically are my Dantooine base, which I will show you later. Mos Eisley, of course, you need that for the bazaar. Well, for selling on the bazaar, I should say. The ground floor landing platform, which is very extra and completely unnecessary, but since this character actually goes down there a lot to go across to the I'm literally teleporting downstairs. This character is going to be going to the craft hall a lot, so I actually am going to use that for her. And I think the other one goes to is it Headshots? I don't know. It's one of the player cities that has a bazaar already set up, so I can port straight to the bazaar when I just need to shop as opposed to when I need to sell. Mos Eisley is for selling. And of course, in the northeast room, on the far end, back by the windows, I made a hot tub. It is if you don't know this about me, it's a bit of a running joke that I always have a hot tub in my Star Wars Galaxies homes. At one point earlier this month, I actually had three hot tubs in my houses, but now I'm back down to two. So, I'm keeping it real here. Um, I always like to do this, honestly, and it's not just a joke. It's partly because the water effects in the game actually give like this sense of dynamism to the room. They're not the best graphics, honestly, but they're moving and it really helps the room feel less like a static pile of furniture. I love using that. Plus, I actually sit here. Like I use this pool. I put little chairs inside of it's actually a fountain. I've just renamed it. I put little chairs in there and then you sit down on the chairs and then it looks like you're in a hot tub. It looks and you put little bubble what are they called? The bubbling stones? I think that's what they're called. Got those in there too, so it makes it look like a hot spring or something. And so now I can do exactly what I wanted to do. I can sit in my hot tub, I can look out the window at the pretty cloud city sky and craft droids. It's perfect. It's exactly what I wanted. By the way, do not do this in real life. Do not play with electrical things in your hot tub. That is a bad idea. Oh, before we move on, I want to say that I like the ceiling in this room the best. It came out the best out of all of the ceilings in this whole place. I was trying something different with every single one of them. This one just happened to fit perfectly because I was able to wiggle the big arches in there and get just the whole line of the blue rugs up on top, and it just looks like I planned it that way. I didn't plan it that way, but it looks great. And finally, we come to the fifth and final room, the Northwest room, the most boring of all five of the rooms, if I'm honest, but it's also the most important because this is my crafting area. You can see right away it's a shipwright station. I am not a shipwright. I have never done a shipwright. I will never do shipwright, but they have the best station, so that's the one I have out. All the others are hidden behind the walls. You can't even see them, including the one that allows me to make droids, which is the point here. So I have my little spot to sit and craft. I have all these cabinets. I've borrowed some of my ideas for how I set up my storage for my diner, which I will also show you later. So I have plenty of cabinets and whatnot to actually hold all of my components for making droids, so I can just quickly open them up just the way I used to before they broke droids. And yeah, I can stand here and craft. And I'm probably going to stick a vendor in here too. It'll be easier. And I kind of want to see like how many people are willing to shop for anything in Bespin. There's only a couple vendors on this whole planet, which is really weird to me. So I kind of want to do it as like a test to see how well it actually performs or whether people are like, forget it, I'm not going to Bespin. I'm really curious to see what they will do. But either way, in this whole room, I didn't clutter it much. I didn't want to feel cramped. I wanted it to feel nice and big and open so that while I'm in here, I can, not feel stressed out at all. Because honestly, this character had made me so stressed. That's the opposite of what I want to do here. So I keep promising that I'm going to show you some of my other buildings real quick. I actually have a very long video on my tea house and my diner that I did, I don't know, a couple of years ago when they first came out with diners. Again, diners are an old thing, but they brought them in for Bespin. It was one of their things where they only bring things back as rewards. Speaking of gating, right? Anyway, I have a video on that already, but I will quickly walk through them. But if you want that, I will put a link to that and you can look through the whole thing. I paw through all the items and whatnot. If that's what you're into, that is what I will give you. But right now, I'm going to show you how the transport room actually works. We're going to run over into this room. We're going to click through and we're going to go to my home base on Dantooine. I'll show you all my little houses in the compound, including two I haven't shown before. That's actually the reason I want to go do this. I can tell I'm getting to the end of this video because I'm losing my voice, but fortunately we're almost done. So first I'm going to go quickly through my tea house. This is my shop, basically. It's a commando bunker? I think it's what they call them. It is a one-room bunker. Honestly, the footprint is way too big for what it is. I don't know why they did that, but that's how it is. This is where I basically have all my vendors. This is where I sell my stuff. And before I zone in, you can see what it looks like without any deco. It's like got this like dark gray metallic look. It looks like a commando bunker. It is what it is. And for my deco, I was going for sort of an internet cafe look, a little bit of a cyberpunk kind of vibe to it, with my chef vendor over by the bar. There's lots of places to sit, like a little mini cantina kind of thing, very cozy. And then on the other side, I've got all my other vendors. And then I've got all these little holonet stations that you can sit down at and pretend like you're playing a video game or something, whatever. It is really all deco except for the vendors. And I really only use this building for stocking my vendors. All of the storage in here is dedicated to restocks and like deep storage of stuff that I need to put on my vendors at some point. Next door to that is my diner. And like I said, I've shown this off in a past video, so I'm not going to go into extreme detail here. But the key thing is it's not open to the public, and that is entirely because, as you can see as I poke through the door here, I'm using a texture mod that I made myself to cover up all of the ugly textures in the original diner. I just don't like them. It's metal and it's red and it's that blue and white check floor, and it isn't just ugly. It's like low res. I don't know what SOE was thinking. This was originally a card game object, and like it's a house and it's a crafting house that gives a huge bonus to chefing and I want to say architect or shipwright. It's one of those. I think it's shipwright. And the I don't know what they were thinking, why they put so little effort into actually making the textures of this thing good when they had like some like A+ artists on staff. I have no idea what happened there. It's just a mess. Anyway, I cover it up, and now that we're inside, you can see I have the whole front area decorated for storage. It is where all of my resources are. I craft here 99% of the time, with the exception of the droid engineering crafting I will be doing in my apartment. My chefing is mostly done in here, so I have lots of chef components and farm stuff in here. And then, of course, the back area has my other hot tub because I can't have a building without a hot tub. Plus, I've got a lounge area, and then I've got this little cantina spot. It's basically where my entertainer buffs my other characters. And I'm poking my head outside here so I realize I didn't show you the overhead map. I'm kind of tracing around the area that's actually mine. Like, I don't own the land, but like that's all my stuff. So I have all 5 of those buildings. That building out to the far west is actually empty. I don't have anything in there. It's kind of just like holding the land because I don't know. I don't even know why I'm holding it. I could probably get rid of it. No one's going to live there. Not a big deal. But then I have all those factories in the back so that I can actually do the crafts that I'm talking about. Now, next, I want to show you this cute little Rhodian hut. I love these little buildings because they are tiny. They are one lot, but they're not tents. They're still buildings, so they actually have doors, and I just think they're really cute. I don't super love the interior, and you can see through the door here what it looks like before you zone in. That's the default. I'm not a big fan of the white tech textures, so I decorated mine to look like a lot of my other buildings, a lot of my other tricks to make it look like this little way station, because that is how I use this. This is my own teleport hub. It is very small. I need to point that out. It is open to the public. Anybody who comes to my shop can use this if they're interested, but I have it set up with 5 edit heads that link to 10 different destinations. I have found that that works better for me than having lots and lots and lots of edit heads, because what happens to me is I go into these teleport hubs and I'm like, ooh, neat. And then I spend like 10 minutes hovering, trying to find the exact spot I'm going toward. Whereas if I had just teleported to the freaking planet and then gotten on my freaking speeder bike, I'd be there already, right? So that is my philosophy here. Plus, then I didn't need another giant building. I really like the one lot buildings, and this is enough for me. I have one to all of the planets you can actually get to. I don't have Dantooine since I'm literally on Dantooine. That would be weird. And I think I have 2 for Tatooine. I can't remember how it works out, but I have a couple that go straight to interesting places. I have some that go to other hub bases on the important planets, and then of course I have one for Mos Eisley. You got to have one for Mos Eisley. It's just too important to neglect. All right, so the very last house I want to show is my farm. If you guys have ever watched MJ and Chris doing backseat streaming, a year or two ago, you probably saw them laughing their heads off watching my footage of my first attempt to decorate this thing. I know they ran it at like double or triple time, and it was just like me. Just it looked like I was flinging like objects around the room trying to. I wasn't, but like in fast time, it looked absolutely insane. I will say I picked the Naboo style farm here, even though I don't live on Naboo, I live on Dantooine, for two specific reasons. Number one, the fairy lights are the best. At night, it is so freaking pretty when they're all lit up. The Corellian one is good too, but this one is better. And the cool patio. I'll show you that in a sec. But I have to say I hate the interior of the interior room on this farm. I don't really like any of the Naboo houses. I have like a big problem with them. It's because they are pink. They're pink and red. And when I poke my head in before I zone in and load it all, you can see it's pink and red. It's like a pink and red like cloth marble look. I don't even know what's happening with it. I don't know what Bright Spark at SOE 20 years ago thought this was a good idea, but it honestly makes me feel kind of nauseated just to look at it. It looks like the armadillo roadkill groom's cake from Steel Magnolias. Google it, kids. That's what it looks like to me. I can't with it. But I do love the patio. The patio outside with this little dome is so freaking cute. I have it decorated like my typical sitting areas. I do this all the time with pillows and whatnot. And I've got mostly storage outside. But this is all storage for my farming stuff when I did farming a lot. It's got my water, my fertilizers. Honestly, the downside of the farming system is how many freaking fiddly items you need just to keep it going. But, I keep it out here in case I do get back into farming again. And if I run back over, you can see the interior after I decorated it. I'll be honest, it's not my best work. It's basically what happened was I gutted this entire room. I took everything out of it and I used all the best stuff in the apartment. And then whatever I had left is what I used here, plus some of the Tatooine pieces that I made. Like I said, I reused the idea of the combined arches for the ceiling. I love that. I actually grew some of these trees myself, the Endorian ones. I grew those myself on my farm. I think that's fun. But yeah, I guess like overall, even after I've covered it with all the Tatooine stuff, I still find the room kind of awkward. Like part of it is the way the doors are set up. I don't like them. They're not symmetrical and they're annoying. The dome is like kind of a problem. I realize I have it covered here, but it doesn't really work. I don't know. You can't see it, but there's like a little archway in the back too, what are those called? Like the window pushouts. Oh, I've forgotten what those are called. Anyway, I've covered it all over. I don't know. It's not my favorite building I've ever made, and honestly, I don't really care that much because I mostly just use this for storage anyway, because the reason I needed it was for farming, not for more storage. All right, fam. My voice is shot, and fortunately, I am completely at the end of my footage. That was my base. This is my Bespin apartment. And of course, I also gave you a look at all the cool stuff happening in player cities on Star Wars Galaxies Legends. And I hope it was helpful to anyone thinking about popping over to Legends for the housing or just check out the player city scene. But especially if you blew off Cloud City apartments back when they first came out, like I did, because they really are much nicer and easier to access than they were at launch. If you have the right portals and portal stuff and the ITVs especially. And I have to say I'm really enjoying the figurative and the literal change of scenery, like just of going to the apartment and looking looking at the whole concept. It's so different from the way housing worked on live that I don't know. It's really nice. I'm really glad we've got it. So I naturally have to sign off by showing you what I was teasing earlier, and that is the Millennium Falcon has landed at the administrator's tower, and you can see it from my window. And if you wait, you can also see them take off again, which doesn't make any sense, but whatever, it still happens. All right, I'm out of here. Later, everybody.